3.
2, 1. So we start off Unit 4 with some major alliances. The Triple Alliance, the Triple Entente, and the Three Emperors League were the three major alliances that set up for World War I. Kaiser Wilhelm, of course, was the leader of Germany during this time, and he was very proud to be German. He's a big nationalist. And World War I starts off with the Central Powers versus the Allies. We have some major ideas here that we need to know. We have the Western Front, which is in France. We have the Schlieffen Plan, which was the German plan to go through Belgium to get to France, one of my favorite things in World War I. And of course, the sinking of the Lusitania, a British boat filled with Americans that was blown up by German U-boats. During the middle of the war, we get the Balfour Declaration, which tells the Jewish people, yes, we will give you a homeland, ... someday. But it gave a promise for Zionism to come true, which will come true after World War II. In 1917, we have the start of the Russian Revolution. Vladimir Lenin leads the Bolsheviks, which are the all-out, we want freedom and communism, versus the Mensheviks, who are more moderate, let's go more towards socialism. We have the creepy Rasputin, who was killed multiple times, but still lives. And the way that Vladimir Lenin gets things done is through Army Order Number 1. We have the Armistice, which is the ceasefire, which is not the end of the war, it just stops the fighting, but it leads us into the Treaty of Versailles. The Germans began the Weimar Republic in response to this, so hopefully that they wouldn't get punished too much by saying, look it, we got rid of our king. Now we can start our own government, you won't hurt us. It also began the League of Nations, which was a failure that was brought in by the American President Woodrow Wilson. But the major guy that started the Treaty of Versailles and made it so vicious was Clemenceau, which was the leader of France, who wanted to punish Germany so that Germany could never get them again. Meanwhile, with the Treaty of Versailles, the Ottoman Empire was taken apart, so we have the Ataturk movement, which allows for Turkey to become an independent nation. In Russia, or now the Soviet Union, Vladimir Lenin is dead, and we get Stalin coming in. He does a lot of plans because he wants mega communism. We have the 5-year plan, the NEP, the Great Purges, where he kills everybody he doesn't like, and the collectivization of agriculture, which is good at the beginning, but then it causes a lot of people to starve unnecessarily. Stalin, of course, is big and mean and scary, and he won't change his plans, even if he knows that it's not really working. Because the economy all over the world is in a really bad place, we have John Maynard Keynes, which begins Keynesian economics, which was what he thought would fix the Great Depression worldwide. But we have a lot of people who are really angry over World War I when Mussolini in Italy is mad that he lost the war and that they didn't get war prizes, so he uses his black shirts to take over the military and the nation, becoming the president and prime minister. Hitler does the Bürgerputsch, which was a plan to take over the government. It failed. He went to prison. He wrote Mein Kampf, and the world is no better for it because it's a terrible book. Meanwhile, in Spain, Francisco Franco was trying to make Spain into a socialist nation with the Spanish Civil War, and he is in power for many, many years, and it keeps Spain out of World War II, which in a way is a savior for them. But Adolf Hitler comes to power in Germany. He is the leader of the Nazi Party after he gets out of prison. He believes in the fascist idea where everybody works together for the good of the government, and he wants to build the Third Reich of Germany, or the third great empire in Germany. He believes strongly in anti-Semitism, which of course is not a new idea to AP European history. In the 1940s, we've had anti-Semitism through the whole time. But he gets power by consolidating his power because of the Reichstag fire. He then uses the Enabling Act to get people out of power. Kristallnacht is the movement against Jewish people, which ends with the Nuremberg laws, which takes nationality and away from Jewish people. He also wants to spread around Europe Lebensraum, which is the living space or elbow room. He invades other countries and annexes them with Anschluss using Blitzkrieg, which is the overnight military lightning advance. One of the major areas he goes into, of course, is the Sudetenland of Czechoslovakia. The French are building the Maginot Line, which is a line of fortified walls, which all the guns are cemented in place pointing at Germany. So what does he do? He goes around it. Hitler's smart that way. Hitler's also making an agreement with Russia with the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact, which says we won't invade you, you don't invade us, and we'll all share Poland in the end. And it worked out well for Hitler. In 1938, we get the Munich Conference, where Neville Chamberlain agrees to appeasement with Germany and Italy, along with France, which says Hitler can go no farther, and it works for a year. Neville Chamberlain, peace in our time, but he loses. Meanwhile, the BBC is taking over all of media, and the BBC, This Is London, is telling us all what's going on, not only pre-war, but during the war as well, helping all Europeans stay in touch with what's going on in the war. Once the war begins, France is easily taken over, and France is split in half. The northern part of France is taken over by Germany, but the southern part becomes the Vichy government, which is led by the rebel fighter Charles de Gaulle, who will be the president of France. He also tries to fight against the Germans to some success. The Atlantic Charter is led by Churchill along with President Roosevelt of the United States to come up with a plan as to how Britain and the United States are going to fight together in the war. And that leads to the big three, which is Roosevelt, Churchill, and Stalin, who unite together to fight and defeat Germany and Italy and Japan. The major battles we need to know are the Battle of Stalingrad, or the starting of the takeback of Russia, D-Day, the northern invasion through France, the Battle of the Bulge, where Germany puts their last chance effort, and the Yalta Conference, which isn't a battle, but it is a meeting of the big three to plan out what's going to happen after the war. Once the war ends, we get the Cold War starting, and we've got a lot of different things that happen to increase the tension between the Soviet Union and the United States, and France and Britain are hanging on with the United States. The Berlin Blockade, the creation of NATO, the Truman Doctrine, Kennan's policy of containment, the Marshall Plan, or the economic miracle of Europe, where we rebuild. Truman Doctrine, of course, is giving men, money, and machinery to any country being threatened by communism. They fight back by establishing the Warsaw Pact, which is all communist nations fighting together, and they lower the Iron Curtain, which is not a real curtain, but just a imagination wall that splits Communist East from Free West. Meanwhile, starting in 1947, after World War II, we have decolonization going on. Gandhi is leading India into independence. Abstract art is also starting up where, hey, let's look at a toilet. That's art. Awesome. In Britain, we get some social welfare with cradle-to-grave help for the people, and we get a welfare state. Now, this is not welfare where everybody gets a handout, but where everybody works together, kind of like a socialist idea. Meanwhile, we're all starting to care about the environment, and we should all recycle. And with America becoming a major player after World War II, we get Americanization throughout Europe, where we are starting to spread our ideas to Europe instead of Europe spreading their ideas to the United States. Meanwhile, in Russia, we get a new leader after Stalin dies. We get Nikita Khrushchev, who builds the Berlin Wall. He has the 1956 secret speech, which he lays out what he wants to do to set himself apart from Stalin. And he goes up against the United States for 13 days in October of '63 with the Cuban Missile Crisis. After Khrushchev is out of power, we get Leonid Brezhnev, who works with the United States in a system of détente, which is peace, or like just making things a little bit better. We're not best friends, but we're not enemies anymore. Meanwhile, though, in the 1970s, we have the Arab oil embargo where nobody has any oil for their cars, and that's really bad. The ladies are starting to speak up again. We have feminism, led by Simone de Beauvoir of France, who writes The Second Sex, who says, yeah, women our lives do suck, and so we need to make them better, and here's how we're going to do that. We have neo-orthodoxy, where Christianity becomes important again. Meanwhile, in the Cold War, we have Gorbachev, Margaret Thatcher, and Ronald Reagan, who are like Harry Potter, Ron Weasley, and Hermione Granger once everything calms down. But Ronald Reagan makes issues with the Russians by calling them the evil empire and starting the Star Wars. Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall. Gorbachev wants to do something. He tries with perestroika and glasnost to his openness and freedom, but it doesn't really work because he still wants to be majorly communist, which leads to the revolutions of 1989. This is where the communist countries slowly start taking away from the Communist Party and becoming free. We get Boris Yeltsin in charge of Russia after communism falls. We get the European Economic Council and the European Union, where we get the euro, which leads, of course, to today's Brexit. And after Boris Yeltsin, we get Vladimir Putin, who might be taking us back to communism. We don't really know because he's really scary. Meanwhile, we have Arab nationalism happening where we left the Arab nations, and so they are taking over themselves, which leads to ugliness because we get Al-Qaeda growing and the Taliban, which leads to the threat of Arab people in Europe at this time.